Okay, so just like we ran our test locally, Playwright test can also be executed on any CI provider. We only care about CI here, which is continuous integration. CD, which is continuous deployment, deals with deploying the changes right after CI. Since it has nothing to do with Playwright, let's not bother ourselves with deployment. We'll be using Github Actions for CI, but Playwright test can be executed on any other CI provider as well. Github Actions is very straightforward and simple to set up. So yeah, let's get started. Initially, when we were installing and setting up Playwright test, there was an option to add a Github Actions workflow. At that point, we had set it to true, which means we do have a Github Actions workflow in our project. You'll find the folder at the top here, and inside this folder, there's a YAML file containing everything you need so that your tests run on each push and pull request into the main or master branch. Now let's break it down line by line. This line here at the top specifies the name of the Github Actions workflow. In this case, it's named Playwright tests. These lines define the events that trigger the workflow. So in this case, the workflow runs on pushes to the main or master branches and on pull requests targeting those branches. This job section defines a job named test that runs the Playwright tests. It specifies that the job has a maximum timeout of 60 minutes and runs on an Ubuntu-based runner environment. This step right here is used to check out the repository code. When this action is executed in the Github Actions workflow, it checks out the repository's code into the runner environment where the workflow is executing. The second step is used to set up the Node.js environment. It installs the latest long-term support version of Node.js. This step right here installs the PNPM package manager globally and then installs project dependencies using PNPM. This step installs the necessary browsers for Playwright to execute tests using PNPM. And finally, this step is what's used to execute the Playwright tests. This is exactly what we are using in our package.json file as well. Below this, you'll also find a couple of steps that get executed after the tests are done. So this one right here uploads the test report generated by Playwright as an artifact. It specifies the name of the artifact, which is Playwright report, the path to the directory containing the report, and sets the retention period for the artifact to 30 days. This if always condition ensures that the artifact is uploaded even if the previous steps fail. So yeah, the tests will run on push or pull request on branches main and master. The workflow will install all dependencies, install Playwright, and then run the tests. And finally, it will also create the HTML report. I have already created the GitHub repository for this, in which I'm pushing my changes. Let me actually show you the Actions tab in the repository. This is a repository that I'm working with, and we have a tab here for all our actions. If I click on it, you'll see all these different ways to set up your workflow. We don't have to do any of this. All we have to do is push something in the main branch. The reason why I don't have any actions here is because I'm working with different branches, and none of these branches have been added to the YAML file. The action will only work if there's something added to these branches. So let me actually show you how this works. I'll add one more branch here, which is the current branch that I'm working on. So it's part 4. I'll add it to this list. So now if I make some changes and push to this branch, an action will be created, and in that action, our test will also be executed, because that is what happens on this line. So yeah, let me push this. Okay, so this has been pushed. I'll go back to the repository, and in the Actions tab, yeah, you'll see that we have a new action here. I'll click on this action, and let's see what's happening inside this. So all these steps are being executed. We already have run these checks. Now it's going to install all the browsers. We'll have to wait till the action comes to this step, which is running the actual tests. It should only take about 30 seconds, so let's wait for it. Ideally, this test should fail because our test has an only method in it, and the config that we have set up forbids only in a CI environment. So since this is a CI environment and we have an only method in our test, it should fail, but let's see what happens. Yeah, you'll see here, this failed. and it gives you the reason as well. Item focused with only is not allowed because of this forbid only option. So let me remove that only from our test and run this once again. I'll get rid of this as well. We don't need this. And let's get rid of only. Now once I push this to the branch, you will see a new action created for this. I'll go back to the actions tab, and yeah, we have this new action. Let's see what happens this time. It's running the test now, and okay, there's again an error here. Oh, right. The reason why there's one more error here is because it expects you to have an app running on the local host. We used to do it manually when running locally, but on the server, there's no app running on that port, the port 5173. So we need to add some mechanism that actually runs the app first before running the test suite. And if you have watched the previous video, you'll remember that there's an option in the config file called webserver that lets you do the exact same thing. So let me configure this option. I'll uncomment this, and instead of running this command, I'll just do pnpm dev, and the URL is going to be, now let me do this one more time. So I'll push these changes. Hopefully this works. Let's go back to GitHub and let's take a look at the new action. All right, so this worked. You can see here that all 3 tests have passed. The artifact has also been created. So if I click on this, it will download an index.html file, and I can open this and see how my tests look like. Yeah, you can see the same exact report that we used to see in the local implementation. This is the artifact that gets generated in the CI environment. Now, one more thing that we can check is what happens when we create a pull request. I'll just add a small change, or actually I don't even need to add the change. I'll just create a pull request. So let me go back, and here, yeah, we can see here that we have an option to compare and create a pull request. Let's do that. It's comparing it with the main branch, so I don't really need to add anything, but just for the sake of it, I'll add some description and I'll create a pull request. So you see here that we have a check that is basically the Playwright test check. It's executing the same set of steps that we just saw in our actions tab. So if I open up the details, it's going to take me to the same location. Yeah, we can see here that it's doing the same thing. And once this is done, this branch will be ready to be merged to the main branch. You can actually do it even before this check is completed, but that's not the recommended way, because if something fails here, then ideally it should not be merged to the main branch, because almost always after the CI step, there's a CD step. So if things are pushed inside the main branch, it's also going to make changes to the live production bundle. So the errors that you get here will also be pushed to the main branch. You should always wait for all these tests to be completed and only then merge this branch with the main branch. So that's what a Playwright test check looks like inside a PR. Yeah, you can see here that all the checks have passed. So now I can merge this branch to the main branch. So yeah, that's a brief overview on how you can set up your CI workflow for Playwright. You can add specific configurations to your workflow based on your use case, but a basic setup warrants you to do absolutely nothing out of the box. It's all sorted out for you. Now, obviously, Playwright is a huge library and there's a whole lot to it other than just these 5 videos. But I wanted to get you guys to a good starting point as quickly as possible, and that's why a crash course made more sense. Just like anything else in tech, eventually you have to dig deep into the documentation to find a solution to a specific problem that may not be covered in this series or any series on YouTube for that matter. But to make you comfortable with the library and how things work in general, I feel this series is a great starting point. So yeah, if you like this type of content, do subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.